And we're back once again with On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMAPlay365. I'm your host, Newsome, and it seems crazy to be recording another episode so soon, and I'm guessing it'll feel even crazier recording yet another episode in just a few days' time. But the awesome reality of this is that from fight day of UFC 249, we'll have 3 UFC events in a 7-day span. So happy days for all the MMA fans. Just before we start getting into these fights, I want to say a big thank you to everybody that's subscribed to the channel and gone out of their way to give the last episode a thumbs up, and also for those that have commented too. Please keep the subscriptions coming, guys, and once again, if you could give this episode a thumbs up, that would be awesome as well. And if you want to comment too, I'll be on to answer any questions that you guys might have. So let's talk UFC on ESPN 9. I think that's the title that the UFC are going with. It could be UFC Jacksonville as well, or all of the above. I'm sure we'll find out soon. But in the main event, we've got Anthony Lionheart Smith versus Glover Teixeira. Smith is currently a minus 155 favourite with the comeback on Teixeira plus 135. In regards to this betting line, I do think that there's still some value on Smith. He did open a little bit higher. He did go up to minus 200 at one point, but it has sank back down. I do think that there is value on Smith at this line. I don't think it's going to be a total whitewash of a fight, but like I say, I think at minus 155 you're getting a little bit of value. I do think the line sinks a little bit further though, so I could see Smith potentially hitting sort of the minus 130 region, maybe minus 140. I'm not sure it'll go too much lower than that, because I think at that point there will be a lot of ridiculous value on Anthony Smith. But as for the fight, obviously, I'm going to pick Smith to win the fight. I think it's a real interesting one because Anthony Smith, since he's moved up to 205, he's just turned into a completely different fighter. You know, that weight cut's not bad for him. He's feeling a lot healthier, walking around, according to himself, a lot leaner as well. So that's going to improve performances in your fights. You know, it's a fact. When you're not cutting so much weight, you know, you're not draining the body, you're healthier, the durability is going to be there as well. And again, that's another thing of Anthony Smith. He's been stopped in the past, but his chin looks good at 205. From Glover's perspective, this is a guy that's 40 years old now, but he's not a guy that I feel that is declining. You know, you would say about a lot of 40-year-olds, especially in the UFC, that they're probably on the tail end of their career. And I mean, I suppose you could make the argument for Teixeira that his better days are behind him, but by no means is he on like a hard decline and getting knocked out every fight. You know, he's looking good. His hands are good. Kicks has never been a huge part of his game, but like I say, he's got a good right hand. He sets up combinations well, and he can press forward because of his jiu-jitsu, his experience, and the pressure that he provides on the mat. And that's a big tool for him because, like I say, he can throw whatever he wants to throw, and if the fight goes down to the mat, he's fine down there. So, you know, he can play this fight a couple of ways. You know, he can stand and strike with Smith if he wants to. I don't think that's going to end up very well for him. I think Smith is by far the better striker in this fight. I think he's quicker. I think he's got more weapons on the feet. You know, he'll throw kicks as well as his hands. He'll mix them both together. And in the words of his coach, Mark Montoya, he blends really well. I think if the fight stays on the feet, I'm not sure if it'll be over quickly, but I think Smith will start piecing Glover up, and then at some point, Teixeira is not really going to be able to withstand too much more, and he would put him away. So for me, Teixeira's got to try and take him down. He's got to try and close the distance, get a hold of him, and take Smith down. But listen, Smith has got underrated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. He's a black belt himself. Yes, he's not at the level of Glover Teixeira, but he's not bad on the mat. So I actually think that Smith is definitely more well-rounded in this fight. The issue that I've got, and this is a really big path to victory for Teixeira, because people talk about this black belt and the submissions and things like that, and you know, they're right. But one thing that I really like about Teixeira is he gets into these mount positions and then he'll start laying ground and pound. His ground and pound from mount is absolutely brutal. And if you start covering up, he'll start looking for a choke. And when you start defending the choke and turning back to mount, he'll start pounding you. He's just a nightmare once he gets you to mount. So for Anthony Smith, if he gets taken down, don't panic. Don't let Glover Teixeira take mount. You know, first and foremost, try and work back up to your feet. Try and get your guard back. Try and get back to the cage and stand back up. Just don't give up the mount position, because that is definitely where Teixeira is more dangerous. But I think the 5 rounds in this fight definitely favours Smith. I think that there's going to be moments where Smith is taken down. There's going to be rounds where Teixeira has laid on him for the majority of the round. And I don't mean lay and pray, he'll work, he'll land strikes, he'll try and look to pass positions, transition from position to position. But there is going to be moments where Smith is going to be losing rounds. But over the course of 5 rounds and 25 minutes, I don't think that Teixeira will get Smith out of there unless Smith makes a glaring error on the mat, or, he does allow Glover to take mount, and then Glover starts pouring on the ground and pound. But I do think Smith survives the dangerous moments on the mat. But I think the longer the fight goes on, the more Smith will come into it. I think Glover will fade eventually. He's not got a gas tank problem or anything, but I just feel that in this spot, over 25 minutes, Smith is going to look the better fighter come round 5 if it goes there. That's just what I'm trying to say. And like I say, I think Smith's got more paths to victory. It wouldn't shock me if Smith submitted Glover if Glover started tiring. Smith got a takedown and got on top. We saw Krylov get on top of Glover, so it definitely can be done. It's not as if Glover can't be taken down or controlled on the mat. And I do think Smith does have good topside grappling, like I say, along with his striking advantage as well. So I feel that Smith's got more ways to win this fight, and that's the reason I think Smith gets it done. And next up in the heavyweight division, we've got Ben Rothwell versus Ovince St. Preux. You heard that right, a heavyweight fight for Ovince St. Preux. And we've got Ovince St. Preux that's the favourite at -150 with the comeback on Ben Rothwell at +130. I personally think that this line is way off. I'm not adverse to Rothwell not being a huge favourite, which I actually thought that he was going to. I thought Rothwell was going to open at maybe -175, from Ovince St. Preux's previous fights, first time up at heavyweight. Rothwell is a big heavyweight. OSP's already said that Rothwell's likely going to have 40 pounds on him. So I really expected Rothwell to open up a big favourite, and I do think the value is on Rothwell at +130 now. I can see the line closing quite a bit come fight night. I nearly said fight week. We're already in fight week. Like I say, it seems a bit crazy that we've got fight cards on a Wednesday, but I think that the line will close a little bit. I don't think that Ben Rothwell should be an underdog in this spot. And I'm not saying that I think he's going to go out there and knock Ovince St. Preux out in a minute. The possibilities there, he's the natural heavyweight. I don't think that's going to be the case, but certainly I think with the issues that OSP has had and the performances that he's had lately, I'm not sure going up a weight class into the heavyweight division, being 40 pounds lighter than a very big heavyweight, someone that's fought a heavyweight his entire career, and being a favourite is the right betting line. So like I say, I can see it closing up. And as you can imagine, I'm going to be picking Rothwell to win this fight. Ovince St. Preux, the advantages he's going to have is he's going to be quicker. So his punches, his kicks, his combinations, and his overall movement is going to be much faster than Rothwell if he puts his combinations together and really gets his movement going. But again, looking back in tape, there's nothing to suggest to me that Ovince St. Preux is going to go in there and put on a rapid display and have some crazy erratic movement and, start stringing together 3, 4, 5 punch/kick combinations and do that for 3 rounds. There's nothing to suggest to me that he's going to do that. So if he doesn't, he's going to give Rothwell opportunities to walk him down, close the distance, land some strikes. And for this fight, I actually think a key factor is going to be that size and strength for Rothwell, because I think Rothwell is going to be able to close that distance, like I've just said. I think he's going to be able to clinch OSP up against the cage. He's going to be able to push on him. At that point, I just see OSP just being completely smothered and not being able to reverse positions, even if he starts digging in for the underhooks and trying to turn Rothwell on the cage. I just do not see it happening. And if he does turn Rothwell on the cage, I think Rothwell will just turn him straight back again. And inside that clinch, Rothwell's dangerous. We saw against Struve, he was landing some brutal uppercuts on Struve. And bear in mind, he was punching up on Struve as well. You always lose that little bit of power punching upwards. So against OSP, the height is going to be quite similar. OSP is not going to be like the 7-foot Stefan Struve. If he's pinned against the cage, Rothwell's going to be able to get some really good torque on those punches, the dirty boxing, the uppercuts. And I think he's going to run the clock down whilst beating OSP up slowly against the cage. I know Rothwell's not the same fighter that he used to be either, but I just feel that OSP, unless he does come in at sort of like 240, 245 pounds, which I definitely don't think he's going to, that he's going to be at a huge disadvantage here. And listen, if this was a fighter coming up from light heavyweight, a fighter like Dominic Reyes or John Jones, for example, fighters that have got good movement, fighters that are quick and will land volume, it would be a completely different breakdown. But I just don't think OSP is going to come in and use his speed to his advantage, and I think it's going to be a big advantage. So for that reason, I'm going to pick Ben Rothwell to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got the once hyped Alexander Hernandez versus the surgeon Drew Dober. Drew Dober's currently a minus 120 favourite, with the comeback on Alexander Hernandez at plus 100. This line again surprised me a little bit to an extent. I thought that Hernandez would open the favourite. I didn't think it was going to be a crazy, minus 200 favourite or anything like that. But, the kid has still got some hype. I said once hyped. People are still high on him. And I do get it to an extent. But obviously the form of Dober has really played a huge part in this betting line. And that's why Dober is a minus 120 favourite. I personally think that it wouldn't be too off if the line was flipped right now and Hernandez was the minus 120 favourite with Dober the plus 100 underdog. But like I say, I do understand why Dober is the favourite. He's looked good lately. He's developed really well over the years because he's been in the UFC a long time. He came in quite green and he has developed. As for the line, again, I do think that we're going to see a little back and forth on the line. I think there'll be moments where the line flips and Hernandez becomes the favourite, Dober becomes the dog, and then it might close to a pick-up. I just think there's going to be a lot of movement with this line because, like I say, you've got a guy in Hernandez that was massively hyped on a huge hype train, and he hasn't looked his best in the last two fights. And then you've got someone like Dober, who was a massive underdog against Nasrat Haqparast, who knocked him out brutally in round one, something I personally didn't see happening. So as for the fight itself, I am picking Hernandez to win this fight. I do think the value is on Hernandez. And like I've just said previously, I know his last two fights haven't been great. They haven't been spectacular. I genuinely think it was too much too soon for someone like Donald Cowboy Cerrone. I know Cerrone's not in his prime and he's not the fighter that he once was, but he's still a veteran. He's still a guy that's seen every type of style in MMA. He's fought the best fighters in the world at the highest level of the sport for many, many years. And like I say, I just think it was too much too soon for Hernandez. He started well. He started fading a little bit once Cerrone started picking him apart, and ultimately he got finished. And then in his last fight against Trinaldo, he didn't look great either, but it wasn't just a form issue. He's a little gun shy as well, and I get that. That happens to a lot of fighters when they take the first loss in the UFC, especially young fighters. But it wasn't just that form issue. It was the fact that he looked like a totally different fighter. You take away the last two fights, you look at the OAM fight, he was a wrestler, he was a grinder, he was looking for takedowns, he was looking to close the distance, get chest to chest, but he was working his way in nicely with some nice explosive strikes, moving in and out of the pocket really well, And then you go back to the fight before that, Dariush, we didn't really get to see too much there. The finish was just super quick. But then you'll go back and look at his fights pre-UFC, and he was that type of fighter, a wrestler, a grinder, again, just looking to get the fights to the mat, but again using some slick movement in and out of the pocket to close distance, land strikes. So it really begs the question why he looked so bad against Trinaldo. And I actually found out that he was basically fighting with one arm in that fight. He had an issue with his right shoulder, and subsequently he had surgery right after the fight as well. So I do expect to see Alexander Hernandez fighting the way he normally likes to fight in this fight coming up against Drew Dober, and that's why I favour him. I feel that Dober is the better striker in the fight. Hernandez does have to be careful of that left hand landing on his chin, because if he comes into that boxing range too recklessly and Dober lands that left hand on his chin, he's going out. It's going to be all over. But with Hernandez patched up, I do think he's going to go back to this high work rate, being that workhorse, looking to close the distance with Dober. He's going to be aware that Dober's got power in his hands and that he's a good striker. And if he isn't aware of that, I think after a couple of minutes of being in the cage with Dober, he'll soon be aware of that. And that'll just force this wrestling out of Hernandez. And I think that's where he's best. I think he's got good topside grappling. And I think that's where he can win a lot of fights in the UFC. So for that reason, I am going to take Alexander Hernandez to win this fight. And in the next fight, I'm super excited to break this fight down. It's my favourite fight on the card for reasons that will become very apparent to you all in just a moment. We've got Ricky Simone versus Ray Borg. Ricky Simone is the minus 165 favourite with the comeback on Ray Borg at plus 145. As far as the line's concerned, I think this is one of the worst lines on the entire card. I just do not see why Ricky Simone is a minus 165 favourite against Ray Borg. I think the fight is going to be ridiculously competitive. I think both fighters are going to have the moments in the fight, and I just don't see why Ray Borg is a relatively sized underdog in this fight at all. I think the line closes the closer we get to fight night. I just don't see it getting any wider, and if it does, I just think that's even more disrespect on Ray Borg than what there is already. Like I say, I think the value's on Ray Borg 100%. He shouldn't be this big of an underdog, but I'd be surprised if the line got wider, so I do see it coming back in. From the fight itself, like I say, it's going to be extremely competitive. The reason why I'm so excited for this fight, and I'm excited to break it down, I'm going to be excited to watch it, is I love wrestling in MMA. Anybody that's known me the years that I've been doing this and been in this handicapping game, you're going to know that I love breaking these types of fights down and watching the wrestling and the grappling. And when you're looking at the lower weight classes, so for example, this is in bantamweight, the scrambles and the position reversals and the takedowns themselves just come so fast. It's so quick. It's such a joy to watch. Now with Ricky Simone, as I've already said, he is a wrestler. He will look for takedowns. He is the type of guy that can score multiple takedowns in fights. He does bring a really fast pace. He does bring pressure to the cage as well, so he can do that for 15 minutes. Fighters, they know they're in a fight with Ricky Simone because he never stops moving forward. Even if you punch him and you try and press him back, he'll always constantly be trying to move forward. He's just that type of fighter. Like I say, he's a good wrestler. The problem that I have with Ricky Simone, though, especially in this fight, which I'll explain very soon, is that his grappling and topside control isn't that great. So again, we see it from a lot of high-level wrestlers actually in mixed martial arts, where they can score takedowns no problem, but then they can't really keep the fighters down on the mat. Therefore, they'll get back up and they'll have to score another takedown. So what you'll get takedowns per fight stats being through the roof. Fights where the fighter's got 5, 6, 7 takedowns in one fight, but like I say, that just tells me that they're unable to keep their opponents down to the mat, so they're having to score another takedown. Now with Ray Borg, it's a little different. So yes, he's a good wrestler also. I don't think the wrestling is a huge advantage on either side here. I think they've both got really good MMA wrestling. I think they're both going to score their fair share of takedowns in this fight. But where Ray Borg is better than Simone is in the grappling department. So yes, Ray Borg is another one of these fighters that will have to score 5, 6, 7 takedowns per fight. But he is a fighter that can keep control on the mat. It just takes him a little longer in some fights to really get his reads in down there and figure out what positions he's going to perform better in and where he can hold his opponent down. But he is a fighter that will sink hooks in, that will take you back, that will try and look to submit you, that will try and hold you down. And if you manage to stand back up, he's really good at keeping a hold of that body lock and, dragging the fighter back down. The other thing he likes doing as well is jumping the back, sinking a hook in, whilst the fighter's trying to return back to the feet. And this is going to be really dangerous for Ricky Simone because Ricky Simone has got a really good get-up game. So when he's taken down, he can spring straight back up to his feet. But 9 times out of 10, when he's getting back up to his feet, he'll turn his back, he'll show his back. And that's going to be really dangerous because it's going to give Borg that opportunity to get that body lock he likes, to start figuring out whether he should sink a hook in, jump the back, or try and drag him back down to the mat. Giving you back is one of the worst things you can do to Ray Borg. Now, the one thing that does stand in good stead for Ricky Simone is the fact that he is going to be the physically bigger fighter in this fight. And, it is a huge concern from Ray Borg's perspective because Borg's going to be fighting a really tough guy, a strong guy, a big guy, and a guy that can go the majority of the 15 minutes at a relatively high pace. So that's where it's going to be dangerous for Borg. But ultimately with this fight, I think that, yes, when you're looking at striking, Simone is the better striker. I don't think there's a huge gap in skill, but he's definitely the better striker nonetheless. But I think the fight's going to be won and lost with who spends more time on the mat in the better positions, regardless of what else happens in the fight. I think when the judges are going to be scoring this fight after 3 rounds, if it goes the decision, I think the judges are going to be looking at who spent more time in the better positions on the mat and who was more dominant. Like I say, I can see both fighters scoring takedowns for sure. I just think when the fight goes to the mat, even if it's Borg that gets put on his back, I think his positional reversals and his scrambles and his overall grappling is just superior to Ricky Simone's. I think he's going to be able to find himself in those better positions. He's like a magnet for top position. And I just think, like I say, it's going to be the takedowns of Ricky Simone versus the grappling, the scrambles, the reversals of Ray Borg. And like I've already said, who spends the more time in the better positions? I just think that's going to be Ray Borg. Regardless of who wins this fight, I think that it's going to be extremely competitive. I think they're going to both have the moments, and that's initially right at the start of this breakdown why I said that the betting line should be a lot closer. I would probably argue it should be a pick and betting line, because if you think that Ricky Simone is going to go in there and overwhelm Ray Borg in every aspect of mixed martial arts, then I couldn't disagree with that anymore. From a pick perspective, I am going to go with Ray Borg. I think he gets the job done on the night. In the next fight, we've got Karl Roberson versus Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori currently the minus 150 favourite, with a comeback on Karl Roberson at plus 130. I think the value is on Roberson in this fight. Again, I think it's another fight that could be closer to a pick'em. But I do sort of, on one side of me, understand why Marvin Vettori is being favoured. Like I say, I think the value is on Karl Roberson though. As far as the line goes, again, I can see some movement either way. So I can see Karl Roberson coming back in a little bit and then it getting wider again. I don't think the line flips. I do think Marvin Vettori will stay the favourite for fight week and obviously on fight night too. As for the fight itself, I am going to favour Roberson, and I think this fight is going to be won and lost on the feet in the striking department. There might be some grappling. I think if Vettori does win this fight, it'll be because he's closed the distance on Roberson, he's clinched up with him, pushed him against the cage. I think Vettori might be the more physical fighter in this fight. So if there is long periods of clinch time against the cage, I do favour Vettori. That's a path to victory for him. But ultimately, like I say, I think the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. They're both good strikers, and they're also both southpaws as well. And this is the reason why I favour Karl Roberson. I just feel that with Karl Roberson's background in kickboxing and being a former Glory fighter, I just feel that he's going to have the edge when it comes to technical striking and speed. I think Vettori might have the hardest shots. I think he might have the more volume. But in regards to, like I say, just landing clean, crisp, technical strikes, I just favour Roberson. I feel that the leg kick, the lead leg kick and kicking the calf is going to be a weapon of Roberson as well. You saw in his last fight against Kopylov, Roberson really enjoyed fighting against a southpaw fighter, and you could see that he enjoyed striking with another striker in southpaw more than any of these previous fights that he's had in the UFC. And Kopylov is actually not a bad fighter either, and he made him look like an amateur inside the cage. So it really tells me that Roberson loves his southpaw versus southpaw matchup. I think that, like I say, he's going to land the more technical strikes. I think when the judges are looking at the decision, should it go there, I feel that they're going to be looking at Roberson really enjoying himself in there and looking like the better fighter on the night. So I'm going to go with Roberson to win this fight. And in the next fight, we're back in the heavyweight division. We've got Andrei Arlovski fighting the UFC newcomer, the former PFL heavyweight tournament millionaire, Philipe Lins. We've got Philipe Lins currently the minus 155 favourite with the comeback on Andrei Arlovski at plus 135. And I think the line's about right. You know, I do feel there's value on Lins. Lins did open a little bit higher. I wouldn't be adverse to seeing Lins at minus 175. It also wouldn't shock me if the line got there as well, you know, move there closer to fight night. Like I say, I do see there's a little bit of value at minus 155. And obviously, I think Philipe Lins is going to win this fight. You know, it's not going to be easy for him, but I do like what I've seen from Lins. So he's a heavyweight, but he's not a huge heavyweight. He doesn't weigh in at 265 pounds. He's got good movement. He's got quick hands, especially countering as well. So when fighters are coming forward and they're throwing big shots on him, he'll quickly counter in combinations. So he'll throw a quick hard 1-2, or he'll throw a 3-punch combination to counter his opponent. Moving forward, the volume's not as great as what it is moving backwards, but moving forward, he's got a really solid low calf kick. It was a huge weapon for him, especially in that $1 million fight against Josh Copeland. He really beat up that lead leg to the point where Copeland was struggling moving, struggling to stand up. And then Lins just took over the fight and ultimately put Copeland out. He's also got some nice knees inside a tie clinch as well. So he's really well-rounded, Philipe Lins. And like I say, I did like what I saw from him. I would potentially like to see a few more takedowns. Takedowns could really work in this fight. The issue I've got in this fight is I could actually see it it being quite uneventful, which might end up playing out close should it hit the scorecards, because Arlovski recently is also a slightly better fighter countering nowadays. He's got a good count, he's got a jab, he's got a good counter 1-2 himself. He likes to get in there, land a couple of strikes, move straight back out, and he is on the back foot for a lot of his fights. Well, I know he wasn't against Rothwell, but he was having a great performance and he was having a lot of success pushing forward and landing on Rothwell. But I feel that once Arlovski tries this with Linz, and Linz cracks him with a good counter 1-2 or a good 3-punch combination, I feel that Arlovski's going to start thinking, okay, well, it might not be that great to be aggressive with this guy because he's just going to tag me up. And at that point, we're going to have two guys that seem to do quite well countering, fighting each other, and that normally leads to a bit of an uneventful fight. At that point, it's going to be just a point scoring fight, punch for punch, seeing who's going to make the first move, trying to feint their opponent, trying to get reactions out of them. And like I say, we've seen that a few times. You look at the Arlovski and Walt Harris fight, that was a little like that. They were both sort of just waiting for their opponent to engage, and it ended up being a really close split decision. So I could see the same thing happening here. But if Linz does really turn it up, does start landing that low kick, and does start cracking Arlovski, I can see him winning this fight. So I'm going to take Philipe Linz to win. Next up, we've got Michael Johnson versus Thiago Moises, and they're both at a -110 pick'em. And there's value on either side here. If you've got a strong read, both sides are bettable because both fighters have their advantages. Both fighters also have the weaknesses. Both fighters aren't on the greatest of form, but ultimately one fighter has to win. So if you've got a solid read on this fight, I feel like there's value either way. In regards to the fight itself, I do lean Michael Johnson. I feel that the southpaw versus orthodox style of fight is going to favour Johnson in this fight. What Thiago Moises really likes doing, and we've seen it in his last couple of fights, he really likes working that low calf kick to the lead leg of his opponent. But because Michael Johnson is a southpaw, it's not going to be as available as what it would be if he was fighting another conventional style striker. So that low calf kick isn't going to be a huge weapon for him, and that is one of his big tools taken away from him in this fight. And then you look at the speed. Michael Johnson's speed used to be phenomenal. It's not as quick as what it used to be, but I still think it's going to be greater than Moises' speed. And I just feel that Johnson's just going to land the harder shots. However, if Moises does get his timings down, his reads down early, and he's able to counter the strikes coming in from Michael Johnson, there's a good chance that he could crack Johnson with a straight right down the pipe and put him out. But I just feel that Johnson's movement is a little bit better than Moises' movement. I think his speed's a little bit greater. And when you're looking at this fight, if there isn't a finish, which I don't think there will be, you've just got to look at how the judges portray the fight. And if this fight just stays on the feet for 15 minutes, I think the judges are going to see Michael Johnson just darting in and out, landing shots, and ultimately racking up the volume and racking up the points and winning on the scorecards. The one other curveball that could end up coming in this fight is Moises could try and take Michael Johnson down. When Johnson is taken down, he does struggle to get back up at times. We saw against Stevie Ray, he lost that fight because of that last round because he couldn't get back up to his feet. Moises is a better grappler in my opinion than Stevie Ray. His wrestling could potentially be better as well, but the one concern I've got from that respect is that, again, the southpaw stance from Michael Johnson is going to cause Moises a little difficulty in regards to getting his entries timed and being able to shoot, a good takedown and getting Johnson down. So again, that's a concern for me as well. Like I say, overall, I think the fight's going to go to the scorecards. If Moises doesn't get him down a couple of times over the 15 minutes, I just see him losing that decision. So I'm going to take Michael Johnson to win the fight. And in the next fight, we've got Sijara Eubanks versus Sarah Moras. Eubanks is currently a -350 favourite with the comeback on Moras +290. I don't see any value in this fight at all. I do think Eubanks is going to win the fight, but you just can't lay that chalk at -350. The line's way too high. I don't see any value in it at all. I don't even know if it'll come down. I suspect it might do because I just think it's ridiculously wide. But even if this line came down to -250, I still don't think there's going to be any value in it. I personally think that the line shouldn't be any higher than -200, but I just don't see it getting there. As far as the fight's concerned, I think we're going to see Eubanks trying to keep this fight on the feet. I think we're going to see Moras try to get this fight to the mat, trying to get topside, trying to submit Eubanks. I think there's a big gap in skill on the feet and in speed. You know, Moras isn't a great striker. She does thrive more on the mat than she does on the feet. I think Eubanks is going to be getting into the pocket. She's going to be landing combinations and trying to take Moras out of there with strikes. I see her accumulating quite a lot of volume in regards to strikes, but we have seen Eubanks in the past slow down. She did it against Kelleher. This is one reason why I think the line shouldn't be this high, because I'm not a big fan of Kelleher as a fighter. I think she's one of the worst fighters in the division. I don't mean to be disrespectful, it's just my opinion. And, you know, Eubanks took that loss to her, and I'm surprised that Eubanks lost that fight. In regards to this fight, if Eubanks does slow down a little bit, Moras could take advantage of that, get her down to the mat, start working, potentially try and lock up a submission if she's tired. But I just don't see it happening. I see Eubanks winning at least 2 rounds out of the 3. I don't see a finish. I think Eubanks is going to win by decision. And next up, we've got Hunter Azure versus Brian Kelleher. This fight is at 145, so I think it was Kelleher that said that he didn't want to cut weight if he was going to fight within this quarantine period. Totally understand that. Hunter Azure, a minus 165 favourite to come back on Kelleher, plus 145. And actually, I think the value at this point in time is probably on Kelleher. Marginal value at plus 145, but I think the line should be a little bit closer. And come fight night, I do think that we'll see that happening as well. Again, I can see a bit of line movement, so I could see Azure's line coming down a little bit more and then it getting widened again. So I do see a little bit of movement, but ultimately I think at minus 165 for Azure, I think it's a little too high. But in the same respect, I do favour him to win this fight. I actually think he's going to look and be the better fighter at £145. This is a guy that's shredded, that's like a little tank at 135. I've always wondered how he manages to cut all that weight, because it does look like he has a big weight cut. And with the way he fights, he's quite a fast-paced fighter with good strikes, with a wrestling background, so he can mix it in really well. Now at 145, he's going to be more blown up here. So in some respects, you could argue that, is he going to have too much muscle mass? Is he going to tire a little bit more than what he normally would because he's carrying extra muscle? And that is a valid argument. We have seen that be the case in the past with fighters moving up, big fighters moving up. But with Azure, I actually think this will benefit him. I think the size will benefit him. I think Kelleher might have the speed advantage, but definitely size, physicality, and the power in the hands are going to be huge factors for Hunter Azure. I think Kelleher is definitely going to have moments in this fight. I think he's going to be able to try and look for takedowns against Azure. I was quite surprised that Azure got taken down so many times in his last fight. I feel that Kelleher could replicate that, but I do think it's only a matter of time before Azure starts making them reads and he starts being able to throw Kelleher off him and defend the takedowns and start landing strikes. Azure's got a nasty low kick. I really like it, and he sticks to it for 3 rounds, which is something that I really like as well. And in his hands, he just seems to drop everybody that he touches with them, and they come in combinations as well. So it's not just looking for a big overhand right to try and knock his opponent out. He's got a good counter left hook. He's got a good straight right. He puts combinations together well. And like I say, mixes in that low kick. So although Kelleher has got the experience, and I do feel that Kelleher's best path to victory in this fight is to get top side of Azure and look for a submission like he did against O'Day Osborne. So that's where I think that Kelleher wins the fight. I just don't think that happens in this fight. I think Azure's going to be too big, too physical, too strong for him. And like I say, I think at some point we're going to see Kelleher get put down. So I'm going to take Hunter Azure to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the returning Chase Sherman to the UFC. I'm excited to have him back. He's fighting Issac Villanueva, and Chase Sherman is currently the minus 135 favourite with the comeback on Villanueva at plus 115. I don't see any value in this fight. Whether you want to bet the underdog or whether you want to bet the favourite, I personally wouldn't recommend betting any of these guys straight at all. As for where the betting line goes closer to fight night, I'm really not too sure with this one. It's anybody's guess. You know, I could see an argument for Chase Sherman to be this favourite. I could see the argument for Issac Villanueva to be the favourite as well. So we're going to see some movement for sure. I just don't know where it's going to finish is all that I'm saying. In regards to the fight itself, Chase Sherman has looked okay lately. He's been finishing guys with low kicks. He's just engaging people out there. Finished his last 2 fights with brutal kicks that completely took the fighter's legs from underneath them and ultimately got him the TKO finishes. And then you've got Isaac Villanueva, who's going in there and steamrolling guys in the first round. It seems like as soon as he put hands on his opponents, they seem to be hurt or go down. And then when it comes to Chase Sherman, even though Sherman's been winning his last few fights, he's still been getting knocked down and hurt badly in every single fight. So that leans me to think that although he could chop the legs down of Villanueva and try and get a third fighter out in a row that way, I just see Villanueva landing something on Sherman. I just feel that this time, when Sherman gets cracked by this guy, he's going to go down and he's probably going to stay down. So I'm going to take Isaac Villanueva to win the fight. And finally, the latest fight to be added to the card, we've got Gabriel Benitez versus Omar Morales in the lightweight division. I emphasize lightweight because Gabriel Benitez is moving up for this fight, so it seems like another fighter that possibly doesn't want to cut too much weight during this COVID-19 quarantine period. And again, I totally understand it. Currently, we've got Omar Morales as the favourite at -170, with the comeback on Gabriel Benitez at +130. And to be honest with you, I think the line is a little bit off in this fight. I do think that there's value on the underdog with Gabriel Benitez. And as for where the line goes, I do think that we see the line shorten a little bit as well. It just depends how much stock people are putting into Omar Morales in this fight, if the line gets wider or not. Personally, I think it should come down a little bit. I don't think that Omar Morales should be a -170 favourite. So like I say, I think the value is on Gabriel Benitez right now. In regards to the fight itself, I do feel that Gabriel Benitez is definitely the more experienced fighter. I think this is a fight that's going to predominantly be played out on the feet, won and lost on the feet in the striking. I think Gabriel Benitez is definitely the better striker, the more technical striker, packs the more volume. He's got power for sure, but then again, the power was really at 145. Is that going to translate up to 155? So for example, his kicks were brutally powerful. He used to really hurt opponents' legs with his kicks. So is that going to translate up to 155? Is he going to be able to hurt Morales' legs with his kicks? Because Morales has got big legs himself, big kicks himself. He's a big dude himself. He's really big for the lightweight division, and this is where I can kind of see if Morales does win this fight, again, it's going to be because of his physicality, because the dude could arguably fight at welterweight, and then you've got a guy coming from featherweight up to lightweight to fight the big lightweight. So in regards to power, strength, I do feel that Omar Morales will have advantages there, could potentially try and clinch Benitez up against the cage. I don't think he'll be too successful with takedowns if he tried them. Gabriel Benitez has got a really quick stand-up game. I don't see him being smothered. But what I do see from Gabriel Benitez is he's going to have a speed advantage and, like I say, technique advantage, experience advantage, and I think that's going to get him the win in this fight. So I'm going to pick Gabriel Benitez to beat Omar Morales. And that's all for this episode of On the Moneyline. I hope you all enjoyed it. And once again, guys, I'd appreciate all the likes and thumbs up to this video and subscriptions to our new YouTube channel too. Remember, you can get all the betting advice you'll ever need over at MMAPlay365.com. We cater for long-term gamblers that like to build their own bets and strategies, gamblers that just want to follow exactly what I bet on. And as a long-term winning gambler over the last 3.5 years, that'll come good for you. And we also cater for you fun gamblers that just like to play the long shot fun parlays, or ACCAs as we call them in the UK. We have plenty of different packages for everybody to choose from, and they're all at very affordable prices too. So just hop on to MMAPlay365.com and see what option is best for you. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you for the next event.